quick. So we're going to start the meeting now. Officially, recording is in progress. To let everybody know, we're going to start with the transcription. My name is Scott Locke. I am the co-founder, CEO of Inferno Red Technology, who is sponsoring this meeting. I want to make sure I get into the transcript, so I'm going to say it again. If you're looking for a change of career in terms of the company you work for, if you want to hire somebody to build pretty amazing software, look no further than for Inferno Red Technology. You can find us at infernored.com, INFERNORED.com. If you'd like to reach out to us and get a chance to work with our amazing team, which includes Lee Richardson, who's sitting here, Greg Winograd, who's sitting in the back, feel free to reach out. We're happy to provide pizza and hosting for the meetup and the account. So with that, Santosh, why don't you take the opportunity to introduce yourself and then roll right into it. Thank you. And you are muted.
Yes, it's been a long day. Thanks for the intro. My name is Santosh. I am currently based out of Orlando, and I say currently because I may be moving in a few days, a little bit north of here, not too far. So I currently work at Microsoft. I work as a consultant, so I'm one of those people that go from customer to customer. Microsoft loans me out to customer, and I go implement different Azure solutions at customer sites. So that's kind of my day job. I am also organizer for the Orlando .NET user group. So user groups, .NET user groups in particular, are very dear to my heart. And I'm organizer for the Orlando Codecamp, which just took place exactly 1 month back from today. So that's a great event. If you ever get the chance, come to Orlando Codecamp next year. It's in March. Weather is nice in Orlando at that time. And a little bit about myself. I love speaking at user groups, conferences, meetups. Different stages and scales. I also give talks on a wide variety of topics, so I can speak about. This is a talk on AI, but previously I've spoken about topics like NoSQL databases with Cosmos, serverless. Azure, DevOps, you name it. I've probably given a talk on that one. So, I'm looking forward to this one. A little bit about this talk in particular. A few weeks back, I was invited to do a hackathon with a customer involving Semantic Kernel. So I prepped for the hackathon. I never ended up doing it because personal reasons caused me to miss the hackathon. But then I was sitting on a treasure chest of knowledge, and I figured I would convert that into a talk. And when Lee approached me to do a talk on a short turnaround, I kind of had this one in my back pocket, so I decided to build this into a talk, and here I am. So just fair warning, this is a fairly new library. You will not find much information on this one, and that's probably a side effect of it being so new. When Microsoft released OpenAI, they also released Semantic Kernel, and it is, it's brand spanking new. You'll see that I'm using a preview version of it in my preview version of the NuGet package. So looking forward to this talk. With that, if you're okay with it, I'll go ahead and share my screen. Please tell me you can see a screen with a kernel on it.
Yeah, that's good.
Okay, that was deliberate. You see the kernel in the background, Semantic Kernel. Yes. Laugh emojis would be nice for my bad jokes, but enough with that. So let's get moving. So that's a little bit about myself. Best place to contact me is probably LinkedIn these days. Everything else is too chaotic in terms of social media. I will give some resources at the end of this talk. I am still building out my GitHub repo for this talk. I'm not as well organized as I would normally be because it's quick turnaround on this one. But I'll probably put this up on my GitHub repo at some point. So just a quick screen I wanted to start this talk with. So this is a common saying that's been going around, and you can kind of see it from different perspectives. Some people will say, oh, it's political. Some people will say it's, this is what it's going to be. And I kind of am the camp of people who think that, yeah, this is kind of a true statement. There's things that make you more efficient, and it behooves of us to adopt those new technologies and use them. And people are afraid that AI will take over the world and Terminator style kill people, but that's not what we are worried about. I think what we should be worried about, and I'll talk a little bit about responsible AI later on in this talk, but I think that we should generally be worried about people misusing technologies. And if you are a um, if you are a conscientious person and you don't want to see it misused, then you might as well be early in the field and start setting trends. So that's how I see this. Today's agenda is pretty straightforward. I won't even wait to get into code. The first thing we'll do is we'll write a simple chat GPT app using Semantic Kernel, and I will show you how fast and efficient it is. Then I'll discuss some basic details. All of us know a little bit about AI. We heard about ChatGPT and DALI and a bunch of other, uh, I guess, models lately, but slash software lately. But we want to know, what's behind these software. So I'll discuss that a little bit. And by the way, when you see SK, that's semantic kernel. I got tired of writing out the whole thing. And we'll discuss basics on LLM AI models, semantic kernel. I will write a function, simple semantic kernel function, and then we'll see how to chain them together, which is going to be really interesting. I will show you how to build skills. So, like if you have ever coded for voice assistants, they have skills for Alexa and so on. You can similarly create skills for semantic kernel. And the best part is that your coding language is English for these skills. I will also give a couple of other features of semantic kernel, how to use some pre-existing skills and how to write quote unquote native functions. So, you like to write in English, but I'm also a C# coder at heart. So I want to write some of my skills with functions in C#, and I'll show you how to do that. And whenever I do a talk on AI, I always end it with some simple, responsible AI principles. And throughout this talk, I will be monitoring the chat. If I don't respond to a question for more than a couple of minutes, feel free to stop me and I will be happy to respond to that. I like to keep it interactive. Any questions so far?
Nothing here in the room so far.
Not yet.
All right, cool. So what we're going to do is we will be writing we'll be coding a ChatGPT application from scratch. So before I start coding, I want to kind of show you what's powering this application. So what's powering this application is a instance of Azure OpenAI. If you can see my screen right there, it's currently this one is not available to everyone, but you still can make use of these same principles, and I will show you how to do that. You can run this against OpenAI API and just do the exact same things. Azure OpenAI and OpenAI, are the same thing. Azure is you want to use Azure basically for enterprise reasons. So, a few weeks back, I read a story where Samsung developers submitted their code to ChatGPT and it kind of went into public. If you want to prevent that from happening, this is what you want to use. You want to use Azure OpenAI, and then there's a whole bunch of options you get for networking and identity and other items, which makes your traffic private and it doesn't expose it to the public. So definitely, if you're doing private, if you're not doing a talk like me, and if you're doing some kind of company, private proprietary data, always use Azure OpenAI instead of the regular OpenAI. And definitely don't ask ChatGPT about, don't entrust code secrets to the ChatGPT software that's out in the open. Use Azure OpenAI. So when you use a provision Azure OpenAI instance, all you need to know is the couple of things. You need to know what models you're using. And I will talk about models later, but for the purposes of this uh, application, I'm using a ChatGPT model. As you can see, it says GPT 3.5 Turbo, and you can create more models. So for instance, I could use any of these other ones like Text Ada, Text Query. Um, DaVinci has code and text and so on. So you'll see, and again, I'll talk about all these models later, but for the purposes of this application, we're using ChatGPT because that's what everyone wants to talk about. And the other thing you need to know is this part. So for the purposes of this talk, I will be using the endpoint and I'll be using the key. So I can use the primary key one or key two. And the other item I'll be using is the name of the deployment. So these are the three things I'll take away from my Azure OpenAI instance. Other than that, it's just sitting out there. It's probably incurring some cost because I've been hammering it lately, but it's not that expensive. I do want to stress that if you're using any kind of API like OpenAI or Azure OpenAI, it is going to incur some amount of cost. So don't run like million data points against that and be shocked when you get a bill. So that's all, Okay, cool. So this is what I'm using, right? So next we'll jump over to a window. Is this visible at all? Can you read this? Or if you're in the room?
Definitely readable at the front room, at the back, yeah.
I can try to increase the size. All right.
It's good.
All right, cool. So multiple people, including the chat, says you can read it. So I will take that and run with it. Okay. So the first thing I want to create is I want to create a console application. I like writing console applications because I don't like dealing with any. I just want to show the input and output and C# and not have anything else get in between. So console it is. So I'll create a .NET new console. We will call it, let's see, capital area .NET and chat GPT. It's extremely innovative name, but bear with me. And then for the framework, we'll be using .NET 7.0. It really doesn't matter. I think you can use .NET Core. Oh, of course. And all right. And please excuse my errors. I'm just, trying to do a little bit of live coding, so bear with me. Okay, so that's it. So now I have a capital area.NET ChatGPT console project. I'm going to open up and Visual Studio Code. There it is. So the first thing you need in here is obviously, I already showed you that you need to have a Azure OpenAI instance or an OpenAI instance. So the next thing you need is the packages. So we will add the semantic kernel package. And as I add the semantic kernel package, you will see that I'm using a 0.12 preview version. So this is really, really early. So again, I want to stress that please do not take this and try to write business production code with this, because that could end up in a bad situation. Then I'll have integrated terminal over here just because I like to do that. Okay, so I have added semantic kernel to this one. So the next thing I want to do is kind of get rid of the boilerplate code, and I will start with, let's see, I want to add a few items, and these are essential because these are the configurations for me to connect to my ChatGPT instance. I'll quickly flash this. This is the alias, the deployment ID, OpenAI endpoint, and the key. And I'm going to close that out. That's why I put it in a region. Region can actually be used for good purposes, believe it or not. And let's go ahead and restore this. Sure, restore. Okay. Okay, so we have all the Azure OpenAI chat completion service, all the configuration values in here. So next thing I want to do is I want to start building a kernel. So this is the semantic kernel, SK kernel. So I built this, but then, this is going to throw an error because it don't know what this kernel is, right? So I'm going to add the namespace so it knows what I'm talking about. And that fixes the error. So next thing I want to do is I want to have this kernel configured. So I'm adding a configuration, and in the configuration, I have all these options. So I can add an Azure chat completion service. I can add an Azure OpenAI chat completion service, text completion service, embedding, uh, generation. There's a whole bunch of other items that you can do. But quick tip, like if you want to use the Azure OpenAI, obviously you should use the library that's called Azure. If you have you can also sign up for an OpenAI instance and get a few free calls. If you have the key from that, you should probably use the OpenAI chat completion service. So in this case, I'll be using the Azure OpenAI chat completion service. Oh, there it is. So I'm also using Copilot, so it's actually completing my code right here. But you can see that I have the model alias, which is the name of the model, the deployment, the endpoint, and the key. So this model alias is just some name I give it for my local code. The deployment ID, endpoint, and key I got from the Azure portal. Okay, so that's what we have so far. It doesn't appear to be breaking. I will switch over, just make sure this builds, and then keep going. So I promised to build a ChatGPT like interface. It's not going to be as fancy as the one you see online, but it'll kind of give you an idea of what it looks like. So let's instead of building a broad one, let's build a simple chat. So in this chat, what it's going to do is it'll ask me what I'm interested in learning about, and then it'll try to narrow down my area of focus. So that's the first one. What are you interested in learning about? And it'll so we'll somehow send that to the chat. It will come back with a reply. So let's do this. Send the chat, then get reply, and we'll see what to do with that. And then I want the assistant to ask me, is there anything you like or love in particular about this topic? Is there anything in particular I like and love about this topic? And again, I'll send this to chat and get the reply. And then I will print the entire chat. Great. So what do I need to accomplish this? So that's the question. So I have semantic kernel. I have configured semantic kernel to use my ChatGPT instance in Azure OpenAI. And I'm kind of, asking it a couple of questions, but this is where the whole concept of prompting or prompt engineering comes in. So before I would do that, I want to tell ChatGPT that I'm interested in a certain area. So how do I do this? So I want it to first ask, what is your profession and what is your expertise? So let's do this. It's going to ask for my profession and my expertise, or I'm going to tell ChatGPT that this is your profession and expertise. And then it'll ask me, I'm going to tell it this is what you are. And then it'll ask me, oh, yes, I am. But what are you interested in learning about this? And then I will send something and it'll reply. And then it'll prompt me for a particular topic and it'll reply, right? Okay, so I think we kind of have the skeleton built. Now we need to hook this up with ChatGPT. So the first thing I need to do is I need to configure my kernel to use the Azure Chat Completion Service. Well, let's just use a generic chat completion service, I guess. Completion. And this is throwing an error. Well, why is that? Because something is missing. All right, we'll go ahead and add that. Let's see.
You had an E at the end of the completion.
Yeah, there's an E. Yeah,
Ah, okay, there you go. Thank you. This is why I love live coding, because there you go. Cool. So that takes care of the red squiggly or not yet. Let's see. Get services to get service. All right. This is why you should also be careful of what you use with Copilot. So there you go. So this returns something. What does it return? It returns a iChat completion. All right. So I'm going to just call it. Let's see. iChat completion. ChatGPT. Okay, that's good. So far, it's good with that. So the next is I want to take these above input and create a prompt. So my prompt is that, let's see, my prompt is, I'm telling the assistant that you are a profession, right? You are a profession, okay? I guess it should be professional, but that's fine. And you're an expert in this particular area of expertise, and that's what I will feed in. So using this prompt, I am going to create a chat. So we will call this ChatGPT dot create new chat and prompt. Does this work? So create new chat history. Okay, that's fine. We'll see how this works. I don't know. All right, so I created a new chat and I'm prompting it saying you are a, this is your profession and you're an expert in such. Maybe I should say this is your profession. Right, so now it's going to ask me what I'm interested in learning about. And when I answer it, it's going, what we'll do is we'll add this message, but it's not just any message, it's a user message. Does not contain user message. So, okay, so let's see if I'm missing an assembly probably. Or does it not like over here? Does not know which. Let's just build this. Does not contain a definition for add user message. Okay, so it's trying to convert it to chat. Maybe it's a different type of chat history. So let's see, chat history, but that's not working. So is it the Azure chat history? No, that does not work. So let's see if we can call this an OpenAI chat history. Ah, okay. All right, so I had to typecast it to OpenAI chat history, but does that mean it will also work for Azure? Let's see. No, guess we'll just have to go with OpenAI chat history. Like I said, this library is kind of new, so still some rough edges. This should have probably been Azure chat history, maybe feedback for the team. Okay, so cool. So we took the profession and the expertise, we created a prompt, we instantiated a new chat, and then it added a it asked me a question, it read my answer to that, and it's adding that as a user message. Now, once we send the message, the next step is to get the reply. So let's look at this. So string reply, and then the reply will be chat GPT dot something, right? Dot generate message async. Okay. So we'll call it chat. Okay, so that should do it, but it doesn't like that. So okay, so I guess I need to add an await over here. Did not like that. Oh, it requires this request settings. Okay. provided that new chat request settings. Okay, so that's my reply. But even the reply needs to be added, and this is added as an assistant message. So the assistant is the ChatGPT, and the user is you. So I answer the question. It adds the answer of the question over here as user message. The assistant responds, and it adds an assistant message. Okay, so that's the first chat. So let's go ahead and compile this, make sure we have no issues. Then we'll add a second message just to make it look like a chat, and we should be good to go after that. So the next question is, do you like anything in particular? Yes. So then it wants to read that. So again, I'll read that into the console. Again, I need to add that to send that to the chat. So we'll do that over here. And once I send it, I will get the reply in a similar fashion. And we'll add the reply as an assistant message. How are we doing? Any questions so far? Is it all straightforward, simple, complicated? All right. So I guess, we'll wait and see if this is simple or complicated, right? So what we want to do is we will now do a console dot write line, and we will see the chat output, right? And then what I want to do is for each message in chat messages, I want to write that to the output. So we'll write this and then see if we can pretty it up further. Right. So I'm going to go ahead and switch to the Logic console, and we will see if we can run that. So we will clear here. I'm going to do a .NET build. All right, it built with some warnings, but that's okay. As long as the warnings don't cause my code to break, I can live with that during live coding. And we'll run this. To make a typo. Okay, what is my profession? I'm a software developer, or ChatGPT is a software developer, expert in Microsoft technologies. All right. So now I'm sending this is the moment of truth, right? I'm opening up a chat session and I'm telling it that you assistant are a software developer with expert in Microsoft technologies. It's asking me, what are you interested in learning about? I want to say .NET 7, right? So it's going out and doing the whole big blah, 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 bloop, bloop sound for calculations. Is there anything in particular you would like to, what in .NET 7 would I want to learn? Anyone? Do you want to help me out here? I forget what are the new features.
Records.
Records? Can type it out.
Yeah, record.
All right, cool. We'll do records. All right. So again, this is all happening in the background. It's talking to the OpenAI instance, and assuming my code doesn't bomb, it's going to work. Oh, wait, I did get an output, but it is really not useful at all. Why did that happen? So let's go back and look at my code. So I'm outputting message, but message is really, that's not text. So instead, what I want to do is get some useful information from the message. Oh, there you go. So let's see if Copilot actually leads me right this time. So it's saying message dot sender message dot text, but this is really not it. So what can I do? Message dot, okay, author role and message dot content. So let's see. I'm going to rerun this. All right, let me go with a different profession. Let's see. I am a driver. Let's see. I'll just stick to software developer. I don't know anything. Expertise is, I'll change it around. So I'll still go with Microsoft technologies. And what are you interested in learning about? I'm interested in learning about Azure. So this is where it actually goes out and starts collecting the data. Anything in particular, I will say Azure OpenAI. I have no idea if this will work because this is so new and I don't know if the data it's getting is old. So we will see. Oh, okay. So great. Microsoft is okay. So it's giving me a bunch of text talking about different Azure services. As a software developer, you can leverage this. So and then I want to talk about Azure OpenAI, and then it goes out and tells me that it's a partnership between Microsoft and OpenAI. And Azure OpenAI offers a range of AI services, cognitive. I'm not quite sure if this can be classified under Azure OpenAI, but okay, we're getting a response, which is what we wanted to see. And we also, learned that we should not always trust the response. So that's another valuable lesson over here. And it does talk about GPT-3. Cool. So there you go. Your first ChatGPT application coded live with Semantic Kernel. And let's look at the number of lines of code that I actually had to write for this. So basically, I had three usings. Um, I had to get some values, and ideally, they should not be in code here. They should come from .NET secrets or something. I didn't want to, that was not the point of this exercise, so I did not do it. But maybe I'll update my GitHub repo to do that the right way. So you instantiated a version of the kernel. You configured it with the values for Azure OpenAI. And then you created a prompt. You created a chat completion object. And it created a chat session. So once you created the chat session, you expressed your topic of interest and your topic that you really liked. And both of these were added as user messages. The assistant reply came back when the reply came back from the ChatGPT object, you added it as an assistant message. And that was pretty much it. And then we collected the messages and we basically displayed them. So, and this is 50 lines of code, but I want, I bet you if I remove the spaces and all my console statements, it's probably more like 25 lines of code at the most. So, with 25 lines of code, semantic kernel basically let you write a ChatGPT, like it allowed you to do ChatGPT like chatting. So that is pretty cool. At least I think so. Do you need an account to use the API? So a couple of things. If you're using Azure OpenAI, and I see this message in the chat from Victor, so that's the one I'm responding to. If you're using Azure OpenAI, you need a Azure account. This is true. And currently, Azure OpenAI is not available to everyone. Like I literally had to beg and plead and threaten people to get the access to Azure OpenAI. You can, however, get a account with OpenAI. These are the people who actually provide ChatGPT in public. When you get a developer account with OpenAI, which is free by the way, you can go to the developer portal and configure a key and use it the same way. It's literally the same things that you'll need, like a model, like a deployment name for ChatGPT. They also have options to create deployment names for DALL-E and like the image generation service and other models. But you will need to create a ChatGPT model, and then it'll provide you with a URL and it'll provide you with a key. So it's exact same. The only difference is that you would be using a add OpenAI chat completion service over here instead of Azure chat service. So that's the only difference. Does that answer your question? Okay, cool. The next question. Can I build this in Linux in a container? I don't see why not. I mean, .NET is cross-platform. You're basically using .NET 7, which is definitely cross-platform. In fact, if I had time, today's demo, if I was better prepared, today's demo would have been in dev containers. If you haven't used dev containers, it's a really cool feature that you can access from GitHub, and you can basically code in your browser, and you can run all this code in your browser. So yes, you can do this in Linux in a container. You can also do it in a dev container, which is actually much more. Yeah, go ahead.
Oh, one thing I want to say, I did actually just get my account of the Microsoft Azure AI, and there's a form you need to fill out. I just have a couple pro tips for anyone who's looking to fill that out. One is you can't have an email address that's Google or Yahoo or whatever. You have to have a company one, and it has to match the exact URL. You have to put in a URL for your company and your company's address and phone number. I think it might just be an automated form though, but you have to make sure those two things match, because the first time I filled it out, they didn't, and it came back in 2 days later, and then I had to resubmit it all, and it took a couple more days. The whole process is a pain, but you can get through it. And then I had a question about this that I'm kind of struggling a little bit to understand. Santosh, what's the difference between just using the pure Azure OpenAI SDK and using the semantic core? Like, what is the semantic core getting you on top of the regular SDK?
For this particular instance, I think it's just a simple hook back and forth. I haven't played around with the OpenAI SDK to know that it offers like ability to create a chat object and add user message and so on. So you get these type of simple abstractions. So again, that may be part of the OpenAI SDK. I'm not sure. Maybe if you're playing around with it, we can learn from each other, right? I don't know everything. I've never played around with the OpenAI SDK itself.
Awesome.
So that's one thing, but you will see that this is just one part of it, right? So this is I can actually build a bunch of these type of prompts and other items as skills, and I can chain them to each other and other things. So this is where you really start getting into open, I guess, um, the Azure, semantic kernel's power. So with that, I'll quickly dive into semantic kernel itself. So let me pick up from where I left off. Sorry, did I answer your question? I'm not quite sure I did, but I'm also learning some of these things, and I don't know for sure if it's superior to OpenAI SDK or not, because I really haven't played around with that.
Yeah, I think we'll get there.
Okay. So I want to quickly go through some LLM AI basics. So, GPT basically stands for Generalized Pre-trained Transformer, but I also called it, easier way to remember is GPT is good at predicting text. So, that's, uh, if you, want to know what it is, you can certainly use that as acronym. What it does is it learns from a lot of text data that defined on the internet and other sources, and then it tries to predict what comes next in a sequence of words or symbols or code. For example, if you give a GPT model the input saying the sky is, it's going to try to predict what's come next. As you'll probably get like blue, sky's cloudy, or sky's dark, depending on the context. So if you say something like it's night, the sky is, it may say dark, or it's in Seattle and the sky is, it may say cloudy. So it also uses a little bit of context in that. So GPT models are based on a special type of neural network called a transformer. The transformer, what it does is it basically captures the GPT model captures the meaning and structure of language. It does this with a transformer that has two parts, the encoder and decoder. And we will certainly see how this works, but the encoder basically takes an input sequence or input text and breaks it up and converts it into a vector representation. And the decoder takes this vector representation and generates an output sequence that is kind of related to this vector sequence. And these are some of the models that you will see. In fact, when I was going through the um, Azure OpenAI portal, you got to see some of these models. So, GPT-3 is, it's a large language model. It can basically, so it's the more recent one. GPT-4 is out, but no one knows what it exactly has. So, but we do know what GPT-3 has. So this is kind of an evolution of GPT. So it went from Ada to Babbage to Curie to Da Vinci. So the way to think about this is, it's A, B, C, D, and they kind of went up or became more complex and improved as it went on. So Da Vinci is the latest one for GPT-3, and there's now GPT-4. So they've moved on since then. But Ada was basically had 350 million parameters that were used and 40 GB of data that it trained on. Ada is really good at, let's see, classification, sentiment. I think it was also good at like summarizing things. So, the simple, it could do simple things really well. And then they introduced Babbage, which actually used 3 billion parameters. And we'll talk about parameters a little bit. I actually have a slide on this one, but use 3 billion parameters, parameter inputs. And I was trained on 300 GB of data. And it's really good at things like arithmetic, giving word analogies, also like reasoning things. So that's what Babbage was good at, and it was built on top of Ada, I believe. Curie is it again, you'll see that it uses exponentially more parameters and data. And this is where it started to get into the question answer, translating, paraphrasing, text to speech, speech to text, and so on. And finally, DaVinci is miles better than any of these. And this is where we started to get into creative stuff. So the DaVinci is where you could actually tell it to write a poem and so on, and it would start doing that. So uh, DaVinci is usually the one that's used these days, especially with, if you connect with OpenAI or even Azure OpenAI, you'll basically see DaVinci being the latest ones. One thing to keep in mind, ABCD, A is the cheapest and D is the most expensive. And that's for good reason. This is why, because the computationally, DaVinci is far more complicated than Ada. So prompts, I created a prompt. You saw what a prompt was. Prompt is basically, English is a coding language is how I put it. It's the input or queries that a program gives to an AI. And it uses this to elicit responses. It's basically, natural language sentences, questions, code snippets, commands, and so on. You can use any combination of text, code, or depending on the domain and the task. Prompts can, you'll see that we will be nesting and chaining prompts, more chaining than nesting with semantic kernel, but they can certainly be nested also. So think of it like a query, like a SQL query can be nested within another SQL query. So similarly, prompt is similar to that. I kind of think of prompts like, a bash shell command or a PowerShell command and so on. So, you can certainly, you can pipe a bash shell command on the one. Similarly with prompts, you can do some kind of chaining. Um, the prompt engineering is an interesting term, and generally people tend to put prompt engineering in the whole two words in a double quote. I put engineering in double quotes because I feel like prompt engineering is basically it's the art. It's the art of crafting effective prompts. That's what it is. And you try to tweak your prompts and kind of it's until it becomes this wonderful thing. So it's basically art. But once you discover something, you try to repeat it, and I guess that's where the engineering part comes in. So that's and finally the parameters. We talked about all the parameters and the values, and this is what it comes down to. Parameter, just like you can tweak a PowerShell or bash command by parameterizing it, you can similarly tweak a prompt with parameters. And these are some of the parameters that you can provide. So for instance, if you look at the top three, temperature, top K, top P, so these are kind of the ones that control the randomness and creativity of your GPT model. And uh, the other two, the frequency and the presence penalty, these are the ones that uh, you can control repetition. So the way this works is, if you have higher values, then you have less repetition, or it will plagiarize less from itself. But the answer may not be as coherent or consistent. But if you want the answer to appear more consistent, you have to increase your penalty, which means you'll be penalized and that it'll start repeating some of the words from the input or the output. So that's how you tweak some of your prompts. Yeah, and we will see how some of these are used, and these are things that again it is very dependent on what you're trying to do. It depends on your domain. So for instance, you may want to write poems. So if you're writing a poem, you should probably increase the creativity of the model, and you may want to set it at a high temperature. So the temperature values are between 0 to 1.0. So you may want to set it to 0.8, 0.9, or even 1, depending on how creative you want your poem generator to be. But if you're doing more of a fact-checking type thing, you may want to set your temperature to be close to 0. So that makes it more fact-based and less creative. Fact, and again, keep in mind that the fact is something that the model knows. It does not mean it's a real world fact. That is something you have to double check yourself. Any questions so far? If not, I'll jump into my next one. So prompt engineering, again, these are some of the prompt engineering kind of looks like this. You have to give specific instructions to the AI, and then it'll make sure that and the instruction. Keep in mind that you can also tell the AI that if the user asks you a question and you don't know the answer, then say I don't know. So that is called giving it an out. Otherwise it's going to try to fib. So definitely, prompt engineering involves some of these items. Be very specific. Don't leave as much to interpretation. Be very descriptive. Use analogies. You may want to repeat yourself or repeat your instructions sometimes. Also, the order in which you provide your instruction really matters. So, if you want to say summarize the following, then you want to add all your data after that. If you want to say summarize the above, then you may want to add your data above that. And if you give an example, it may use the most recent example if you give 100 examples. So the order matters quite a bit. You'll see a lot about tokens when you write code. Tokens are basically basic. When you give the input, you cannot basically take the whole text and insert it into the model. You have to break it down into some kind of understandable format for the AI model, and that's what tokens are. Tokenization is the task of splitting tokens into smaller units, and the tokenization cost really affects the memory and computational resources. So for instance, if you look at the tokenizer, if you look at the cost for DaVinci versus Ada, it has different token. Ada is cheaper and DaVinci is more expensive. So, but DaVinci can also handle larger token inputs and so on. So there's a lot of things that you have to play around with, and certainly these are some things that you'll have to know when you're doing it. Useful link at the bottom of the page. If you click on this one, let's see if it opens up in a window. There you go. So this is a useful link from OpenAI in which you can actually, it allows you to calculate token for GPT-3. So if you type in some sentence, it'll tell you how many tokens it requires to process this. So, I'm just giving a quote from a movie and it's telling me I require 6 tokens. A token, they say, is approximately 4 characters. So 29 is 6 tokens, but that's just a rough measure. So, just watch out for how you think it's how many tokens you're using, because that is how your computation is calculated in the models. These are other things that you'll hear, and again, not to dive into any depth with them, but when you have tokens are basically your input text is broken down and then it's converted into a vector format and stored in vector databases. Now, what is vector? It's more of a spatial representation. So, for instance, if I have words, a bunch of words that are related, it may store those in the same space in the vector database, and unrelated words may be stored in a different space. So if I say, medicine, doctor, X-ray, and so on, it may store that in a similar in a close enough space in the vector database to where if you make queries, it may return some of these together. But if I put in football, it may store it in a completely different part of the database, and that's not going to be returned if that's not part of your query. So basically, the model captures the semantic meaning of the data such that similar data points have similar embeddings. And embedding is kind of like a numeric representation, and it's stored in a vector database. And then the queries are they query against the vector database, and they find the most similar or relevant data based on the semantic or contextual meaning. Again, you're really not involved with any of these most times, but this is just like a high level understanding. Now, for the topic of today's semantic kernel, this is basically a lightweight SDK. And the thing about semantic kernel is it allows you to easily mix your conventional programming languages. So, yeah, most AI stuff previously was written in Python, and semantic kernel still allows Python, but you can write C# code, and it pretty much works with doing it gets the job done with the semantic kernel. So. It's these are the different parts of the semantic kernel. So, the kernel has something called a planner. Again, we'll probably not ever use like refer to a planner directly, but it does have it. And the planner makes use of the SMNC, or basically skills. What's the M? The C is for connector. 1 second. Skills, memories. So M is for memories and connector. So the planner basically invokes these three to get the job done. So it's a highly abstracted library. Like it abstracts away most of your operations, and you simply write the code and get the results. So that's why I like it so much, because I'm also relatively new to AI, and this helps me get focus on business problems, solving business problems, as opposed to worrying about what I'm doing with a memory or something like that. A skill. So this is where it starts to become interesting. With semantic kernel, you can write functions. A function is basically, like the name suggests, it's like a small section of code that does something. So you can write functions in English, and those are LLM AI prompts. They're called semantic functions, and you can write functions in native computer code like C#, and those are called native functions. So the way it works is a skill is a group, is a single function or a group of function. It's like a container for these. Memories, again, you probably never have to deal with memory, but again, it's good to know what these are. Memories is something that provide context for your ask. So ask is basically the input. And memories are basically the when you store your data in a AI data in a vector database and access it back, that's how you get the context. So for instance, if I'm asking ChatGPT a question, I asked it a question about, let's say, a topic like semantic kernel, and then I say, oh, provide me the basics, then it knows to give me the basics of semantic kernel. And that's what it means by memory. So to me, the concept of memory is similar to RAM. In a computer, there's a CPU and RAM. A RAM kind of keeps context of all the data that's being processed by the CPUs. So that's similar to a memory. Okay, so that's all I have. Not from, and I'm not done, obviously. Although, how am I doing on time, Ali? Do I have 20 minutes, 30 minutes, less than that?
However long you want.
45 minutes.
Cool. I don't know I have enough material for 45 minutes, but we'll certainly
You can always generate it.
Yep. So what I will do is we will kind of dive into this and start writing more code. I do have pre-canned code if I run out of time, but I want to show how to build up some of these. So I will start with a simple one, where you are using, again, you're using a completion service, but semantic kernel, what it allows you to do is it allows you to do things like, perform different, create different functions and then chain them together. So I want to write an example of chaining things together. So I will get my command prompt, go back, and I will create a .NET console application, and you'll see that, that's what I'll be creating constantly. So I'll call this, SK chain, and create it in net 7.0. I should have that in here. There you go. That gives me access to more of these projects. So as usual, what I'm going to do is I'll start writing code for this. So I will need to add the package reference. So I will add the package reference in the C# project. And then I will start doing my usual item where these are some of the boilerplate code that you'll see I write for most of the programs. So, some namespaces, instantiation of the kernel, configuration, and then hooking it up to the Azure OpenAI instance. So this I'll be using for most of my code. And so think of semantic kernel as a thin layer that's sitting between your code and the kernel. So in the first instance, what I'll do is I'll ask it for a movie name. I'll go ahead and restore this. And then I am going to give it a prompt, an interesting one that says, given this movie name, uh, generate the most popular quote from the movie. So then let's do this. So once I do that, I have what I will need to do is create a function. So I'll create a function and I'll call it my quote function. And this quote function, it uses the kernel. And it creates a semantic, I don't know, I seem to have lost intelligence suddenly. Semantic function. And it will do this. It will do my code prompt. I don't know what this is. I'm gonna delete this. Now, because I'm talking with my OpenAI library, I also can do something like I can say, now for my OpenAI library, I want to use the tokens. I want to set the max tokens to send with each message, and let's say we set it at 500. I mean, just for reference, for the max tokens for GPT-3, I think it's 4096, and the max tokens for GPT-4 is 8192. So 500 is well within the range. So I created this. I created ghost function. So next, I'm going to provide it some context. So I will say my context and screen. And the context I want to set is for the move. No, that's not the right call. It's interesting how Copilot just bravely gives the wrong. Okay, so I'm setting the context is this movie variable that's being specified here. This is where I'm hooking it up to the actual value in C#. So I have this so far, and then it tells me, but my recollection is I have to actually use the kernel to run this. So I call back semantic kernel. I say run async, and I use insert my context, and then I call my quote function. Okay, and we will give that to a output. And then what I'm going to do is, this is probably an await right here because I used async, all right? And then I will write this out to the console. So I'm writing the console out. So what this is doing is it's taking the name of a movie and it's getting the most popular quote from the movie, right? So this is pretty standard ChatGPT stuff that you see in everyday life where people asking it what's a quote from the movie. So maybe I can just use the integrated terminal instead of switching back and forth. Yeah, there you go. Are you able to see the integrated terminal, or is this text too small to read?
Yep, we're good.
All right, cool. So in the integrated terminal, I'm going to do a build to see if this works. All right, cool. And then we will do a .NET run. So it should come up and ask me the code for a movie. Let's see, a movie name. I'll say Terminator, because we're talking about AI, and it comes back and says, "Oh, I'll be back" as the most popular quote from the Terminator, which kind of checks out. Okay, so that's fun. That's fun. Yeah, sure. Anyone can do this, but this is where it starts to get interesting. So this is what I want to do. I want to generate a review for this movie, and I want to use this most popular quote from the movie to generate that review. So, okay, so how do I do this? So first, I want to generate a quote. I want to, create I'll create a prompt for the review. And okay, so we'll call this, and I'll give a review of the movie. No. So take this quote. Take this quote and write a review about it. So the quote is not from the movie because that doesn't make sense. So the quote is actually, I'm going to insert the previous and we'll show how to insert this into here. But what I'm doing is I'm inserting the code as the input, and then write a review. This movie. So what I'm doing is instead of saying that go back to this, look at the movie and then write a code for this movie, I'm saying that write a code write a review that uses this popular code from the movie. So let's see if this works. So I need to set, let's see, the next one I will need to do is expand this. So like how I created the code function, I have to create a review function. So let's see, my review prompt. Okay, that checks out. I think Copilot actually worked in this time for me. Okay. And then I don't need to set any further context because I'm not providing any more inputs. But what I'm doing in here is it's first going to call my code function. And then I'm going to add my review function. And what this does, it performs this thing called chaining. So it chains code function to review function, which means that the output of the code function is the input of the review function. So that's a tall claim. Let's see if that works. So I'm going to do this .NET run. So we'll use the same movie terminator and see, it should be, I'll be back. Now, does it use I'll be back in the review? Okay, so there you go. So terminator, I'll be back is a famous quote. So it used that in a review. So, okay, so maybe that's just for terminator. Maybe it doesn't work for other movies, right? So let's just try a different movie. Can someone give a movie name or type it in the chat? DDLG. Okay. Well, we will certainly do that. I don't know how much we know about DDLJ, but let's give it a shot. Oh, well, that's not, it didn't hallucinate. It just says, I don't know, Interstellar. Okay, I'll take Interstellar. I'm sorry, did someone say something? Oh.
No, you're good.
Interstellar. I don't know what code it's going to use from Interstellar because it doesn't have this single code that defines the whole movie, you know. It's like the only thing that we're sure of is that love is the one thing that transcends time and space. Okay, cool. So, and we'll also do Fight Club just to be sure. Not kidding.
Might get not safe for work on that one.
Oh, yeah, that's true. I forgot to do that. Hopefully, you know, comes back with a safe for work code. The first rule of the Fight Club is you don't talk about Fight Club, which is the most popular quote from Fight Club. So there you go. So did that. Okay. So cool. So chaining functions. This is really cool. You can also do something like, you know, take this code and generate slogans for a software as a service product or something, and set it to creative mode, and it would be, you know, really really do crazy stuff over there. So you can chain multiple. You can, you know, I just showed chaining two together. You can go as deep as you want. I haven't tested the limit, so if you do 20, will it work? I would think it would, but I don't know that for sure. Okay, so that's chaining. So let me see what I have next. Any questions?
I have
So,
one.
sorry, go ahead.
Please.
So, I was having this conversation with my boss like 3 weeks ago
Mhm.
on how to implement the AI. But he was telling me he doesn't want to share the data that we have
Mhm.
because it's actually going, to somewhere else, and then so we couldn't find an actual application for the business. So we end up more discussing the functionality to improve the coding, the code that we have already, but we couldn't find like a business application, like, hey, let's give this data so we can get some kind of prediction. But he said, hey, we cannot do that. So have you seen like a real business application for ChatGPT in your, I don't know, in your last 2 or 3 months that you've been, around the.
Yeah, so a couple of things. Good question. So, people, that's one of the, I guess, advantages of working for, the company that's at the forefront for this, because yes, we do get those kind of questions. And I'm going to kind of put on my consultant hat at this point, but yeah, so one of the top concerns customers have is they don't want to send their proprietary data to a public facing chat GPT because they don't know, if it'll consume that data and learn from it and then spit it out to others, which is what happened with Samsung. So if you read up a story, and maybe someone can find that story and post it in chat, but Samsung developers basically tried to improve their code by sending it to Chat GPT, and uh, that made that code basically the equivalent of making it public because Chat GPT now learns from the code and it has their code in there. So that's not what you want to have happen, which is why ChatGPT is obviously it is OpenAI, and OpenAI partners with Microsoft. So Microsoft itself has a Azure OpenAI instance, and that's the one that I was coding against. Now, this one is basically you can also deploy the same model. So, you have a model for ChatGPT, which is the one we used. We also have, there's a Code DaVinci, which is the one that you would probably use to improve your code. So that's the model for that one. And, you can configure it in an Azure instance. And once you configure it, you can actually set it to be within a private network, and you can connect. If you have a Azure VNet, you can connect that to this one, and that way all your traffic is within your within your instance, within your own network, or even if your data is on-prem, you can connect it to this Azure network. And that way your data stays within your own network. And as for this instance, this model will basically consume your data. It will learn from it, it'll improve over time, but it's not going to share it with other models. So that's the other part of this. That's why you should probably look at a private model deployment as opposed to just banging the open ChatGPT instance. But hopefully that answers your question.
So that data stays in Azure.
Uh,
Azure.
it's it stays local to that model. It will not be shared with like this. It'll stay local to this deployment. It's not going to be shared outside of this deployment.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
So,
Good. Thank you.
yeah, cool. Good question. Can you point the SK to an on-prem program like ChatGPT for all? I do not know the answer to that question. I'll have to find out for you, Brad. Sorry. Um, I will ask the team. How about that? I'll ask the team, and hopefully, they will be able to point me to resources, whether it can be shared or not. So, okay. So I have a couple more coding exercises, but I want to, it's close to 8:15. So I want to see how to best use. Maybe I'll stop at 8:30. Does that sound good, Lee? Or do you want me to stop earlier?
That's when the meeting should officially end.
Okay, got it. Cool. So we'll do a few more. I want to, what I'll do is I'll just pull in some of the code that I previously have, and I'll just walk through them, and then we can have discussions and questions. So what I want to do is I will.
Santosh, before you start, just have a question on the thing that you showed before. So when you say the data goes into that particular model,
Mhm.
so is there like a way to promote? So suppose I have like a test environment, staging, production. Is there a way to promote that model along these environments?
Right now, it's very limited. Keep in mind that this is a brand new service in preview. Um, I'm sure that they will come with um, those type of separations. You can certainly, currently the restriction is that you can only do, I forget if it's 1 or 3, you can only have 1 or 3 deployments per region per subscription. There's a lot of restrictions like that, but yes, ultimately the advantage of doing it in Azure is that you can write like ARM template or bicep code, and you can deploy that to different environments. That is not the, I don't think that's the case right now, because again, it's a previous service and they are still building it out, but ultimately that is the goal, and they have stated it. So probably, if you check back in 3 months, that will, you can probably do that. So my advice is to start writing your POCs and your development code against that, and then probably prep for a launch maybe 3-6 months from now. Hopefully that answers your question.
One more. Yes, thank you. Yeah, one more question. So once a model is like improved upon by learning,
Mhm.
and if I have to create a new model, can I inherit from the current model? So I don't have to like train the new model. Can I inherit some of the features of the current model upon with the new model or no?
Currently,
know?
there's not a way to do that.
Okay.
It's whether that's an excellent question on whether that's an upcoming feature, but currently I don't know of a way to do that in Azure. And I don't
Thank you.
even know if OpenAI allows for that. I will have to double check, but pretty sure you cannot do it in Azure currently. All right, cool. So we talked about chaining functions. We wrote ChatGPT. So the next one I want to do is talk about skills. So skills, like we created functions so far, but functions are great, but you want to templatize these functions and reuse them. So that's where skills comes in handy. So the way skills works is you have, and you'll kind of see this, you have uh, a skills directory, and under the skills directory you can have different skills. So in this particular example, what I'm doing is someone is visiting a particular place, and so I'm creating visiting skills, and the visiting skills could be things like, you learn about flights, you learn about the food at the location, and you learn about the weather at the location, right? So I'm creating 3 different skills. So these are, how do I create these skills? So to create a skill, you need uh, two files. So you have to create this type of folder structure. You'll have a directory that can have multiple skills, and under each skills directory, you can have multiple functions. So these are basically functions. So let's take this function. So this config.json these have some of the parameters that we talked about: tokens, temperature, the presence penalty, frequency penalty, and so on. So you need a config.json file that has some of these parameters, and then you have a prompt file called skprompt.txt. And in this prompt file is where you can templatize this. So this is a weather skill. So I'm saying this weather skill, I am visiting city, I'm staying near landmark, around timeline, what will the weather be like? So Chat GPT is not, it's going to refuse to give you live weather. It's not going to go out and ask, but it'll kind of give you historical patterns saying, uh, there's a joke going around that today is April 25th, so it's the perfect. There's something about a perfect date because it's not too hot, not too cold. And anyway, it's the meme going around today, right? So it's going to give the weather based on historical patterns. Um, so that's a weather skill. And similarly, I created a food skill saying I'm visiting city, staying around landmark, and I like a certain type of cuisine. Provide the names of 3 highly ranked restaurants near where I'm staying. So try to be, again, as specific as possible. And the flight skills, I'm visiting this city from my hometown. What flight options do I have? So three different functions. These functions I should probably call them functions folder. So these are flight function, food function, and weather function, and I put them under visiting skills, right? And how does this work in my program? So in my program, I do my usual plumbing. I do the namespace, instantiate the kernel, hook it up to Azure OpenAI, and then using it to configure or hook it up to Azure OpenAI. And then this is where it starts to get interesting. So, I'm importing semantic skills from the directory. So I gave the name of the root directory and the functions that I want to use. So I'm going to the visiting skills, and then I'm using a bunch of functions from them. Then I'm setting context for these functions. The hometown, so the city that I'm visiting, so let's say that's DC. My hometown is Orlando. The landmark I'm staying around is the Capitol building. I'm visiting around May 1st, and I like Indian cuisine, right? So um, then, I'm running the kernel, and I am invoking the skill, I guess, the functions one by one. And you'll see that I provided the name of the root directory and the skills directory, and then I'm accessing them as I would access the elements like a key value pair or something of that sort. So, I'm invoking the flight function, the food function, and weather function. So let me switch to this folder. And we will go ahead and run it in our integrated kernel itself. So .NET run. And what I wanted to show with this exercise was that you can create highly customized prompts. Previously, we did prompt chaining. Now we're creating, we did function chaining. Now we're creating prompts. So you kind of see how these things start to add up, and you can build more complicated, uh, you know, uh, systems that use outputs of certain prompts and templatized prompts and so on. So this one, in this case, it went out and it gave me the options of different airlines. And then it told me that here are some restaurants that serve Indian food. And then it says, as an AI model, I don't have access to real-time weather data, but it gives me the historical patterns of the data. It also says it could be rainy. So I think it's just predicted rain for you all on May 1st. Let's see how that works. Okay. So that's templatizing prompts. We'll also do a couple more. I'll also dive into a couple more code examples, and then we can take questions. Or if you have questions, feel free to go ahead and ask them. Okay. So so far, what we have done is we have used dynamic skills, right? We have really created these skills literally during coding time and run it. But semantic kernel also comes with its own set of core skills and that are pre-built. So for instance, it has a time skill, it has a text skill that you can use to trim text left and right, and other things. So there's a bunch of these type of built-in skills. So one type of skill it has is a conversational summary skill. And this is basically, it takes a conversation and then it'll do things like, you can call the different skills by using the key value pair type approach. So you can you can say that I want to summarize the conversation. I want to get different action items from the conversation, and I want to get what topics the conversation was about. And this is a lengthy conversation that I also generated using ChatGPT. So, it did a 5-minute transcript, generated a 5-minute imaginary transcript of a call. And what we're going to do is we're going to summarize this conversation and get action items and other things from it. So I will go ahead and run this one. And the first one it's going to do is it's going to process that. Again, all of these are hooked up to my OpenAI. So, it's still using that OpenAI instance, or it bangs it. Wait, hold on. I should have switched to in the wrong folder. Shame on me. Okay, there you go. Core skills, so .NET run. Okay, so it's summarizing my conversation. So that's the first one it did. So next thing it'll do is it'll give action items. So it provided a list of action items as JSON output. And thirdly, it's going to list all the topics. So these are the topics that were discussed. So again, these are the inbuilt or the core skills of semantic kernel that you can use. So the way I look at it is, if you want to summarize something, why not just use a existing one that's well fleshed out, has code written for it, and so on. So maybe that might be a good use case for this. It also has a time skill that you can use to do things like time of the day and so on. So again, that's rather than writing your own prompt, maybe you can use this pre-existing skill to just do that, because that may be more efficient, because it's well tested for things like using the optimal tokens and so on. And the prompt engineering part is also, they got it down for this built-in skills. So this might be a good use case for that. The other one is, text trim. So, if you have like a text with spaces at the beginning and end, you can say trim begin, trim end, and you can call this text skill to take care of that. So that would be a good use case for that instead of trying to create your own prompt. So just some items to consider. Lastly, I want to talk about something called native functions. And these are important because so far we have written all of our functions, so and the prompts and everything else in English. But what this does is it actually allows you to write your own C# code. So this one is pretty simplistic, so I call it my mad skills, and I am writing. I'm sending an input and it's calculating the length of the string. So nothing fancy, but you'll see that I gave it its own namespace, right? And then in my program, I'm actually using that namespace. So when I use that namespace and, again, enter a movie, and what it's doing is it is I'm creating a prompt to get the most popular quote from the movie. And then I'm instantiating, the code prompt as a semantic function. But then I'm also importing my custom skill by calling it by its name, um, and a strongly typed object over here. I'm importing that as a skill. And then I'm running my code function and um, injecting that into this man skill. So what it'll do is it'll take my movie, give the code, and this will calculate the length of the string length of the code. So and you're using C# to do that. So you can also write custom C# code for your skills. Um, Again, I'll run this, but I think I'm kind of at the end of my presentation. I will certainly take any questions. I also have one slide to show on responsible AI, and then we can drop off, have further questions, further discussions, maybe pass sweeping statements about how AI is bad and will take over the world, or any way you guys want to take it. So, I put in Scarface, and it's getting the most popular quote from Scarface, which would be say, hello to my little friend, and that is 32 characters long. So that's, not only did I write a skill in C#, but I also did function chaining to invoke that, combine a templated skill with a native skill. So or a LLM AI prompt with a native skill. So you, this allows you to mix and match. So again, semantic function is kind of like a thin layer, is abstraction. It takes care of a lot of the plumbing. So those are some of the reasons I really like semantic prompt, and I feel like it can benefit C# developers. And I already see this at work, so I expect that many people are going to start seeing um, questions from management on how to use ChatGPT or any of the new AI items in your code. And there are, this is not the only way to do it, but it's certainly an interesting library that you can leverage to do some functions. So again, consider the use cases, use that, uh, just calculate the use cases, see if it works for you, and if it works for you, definitely use it. And finally, this thing on responsible AI. So, these are kind of based on Microsoft's principle of responsible AI. So, fairness, treating all individuals without bias discrimination, reliability, safety, make sure that, you operate reliably and maintain user trust. Privacy is definitely very important. Inclusiveness. So regardless of people's backgrounds, abilities, should be able to cater to everyone. And transparency, I think this is very important. And that if, for instance, if one of the things that is recommended is if you're using an AI to make any kind of determination, you have to be very transparent and letting people know that this is what is happening. But also accountability in that, if AI has decided something, there has to be some kind of checks and balances in place to make sure, especially if you're making things like decisions that like someone's college admissions or loan approval or something. It would always be good to have a human double check that to make sure that it's AI is not just the AI that's doing the calculation is not just being unfair or biased in some way. So some of the responsible principles. So that's all I have for today. Happy to take questions. The resources, by the way, I will put these resources in chat. These are the ones I learned from. And if you go to these links, you'll have a whole bunch of other resources that it points to. I will tidy up my code and I will put it on my GitHub repo, and I will post the link for my GitHub repo. I really didn't want to do that right now because it's not anywhere close to complete or in good shape. But this is my GitHub repo, and I will put my code samples and everything else in there in a few days. That I'll take questions or criticisms, anything else. How can I improve on this talk? Happy to discuss anything.
That was fantastic. So thank you very much.
Thank you.
You want to turn off the recording and we can ask questions without embarrassing ourselves to the internet?